Okay, let's start. I appreciate everyone being here as people trickle in. Maybe we can have someone type in chat every so often. If there's questions, feel free to type it in chat. We're gonna make sure that we run through the content as fast as possible so we can have more time for Q&A. So if you do have questions, please type it in chat. This is really for all of our clients and people that are joining us today. So how it could be valuable is if you engage, if you have specific questions aside from the material that we're going to be sharing and the information we're going to be sharing. So feel free to chime in whenever you have a question. For the sake of moving through the content, we're going to be making sure that everyone is on mute. And then as the speakers speak, obviously you guys can unmute yourself. So I just want to introduce our team first. My name is Wilson, and I started a team about 9 years ago, and I wanted to make sure that during this time when we can't meet with our clients and of course our team members too, that we can at least still build community, at least digitally via Zoom right now. And we have some of our team members here and some of our partners here along with us in this call too. So maybe we can have some quick introductions from our team so people know who's from our team and you know, how long you've been with us and anything that you feel is relevant to share. Ashley?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Ashley. I've been on the team a little over 2 years. Just excited to share with you guys some of the strategies and answer all your guys' questions during this time. So look forward to chatting with you guys and learning more about you guys.
Thank you, Ashley. Jenny?
Hi, everyone. Hi, friends. I see a bunch of familiar names. I see Audrey, Christine Cachin, Monica, Chastity, Jackie, and Taylor. So I'm excited to share a little more about what our team has been doing. As you know, I've invested in a lot of properties. If you know me and my boyfriend Calvin, we currently have 22 units here locally or here in the Bay Area and then out-of-state property. So here to answer any specific questions around that as well, and then share my story a little later on.
Great, thanks, Jenny. Hussam?
Hello, everyone. My name is Hussam. I just briefly introduced myself to you guys in the chat too. I've been on the team for almost 2 years now as well, and one of the agents on the team. This is Mateo. She is our French bulldog in the household, holding us down during the quarantine. But any questions at all, I'm always willing to help. I'll be facilitating any questions you guys have in the chat during the call and making sure those are brought up. So happy to have you guys. Thank you so much for your time and enjoy.
Thank you, Hussam. Assad?
Hi, everybody. I'm Assad Taheri. I'm with US Bank. I've been originating mortgages for about 15 years. And I'm working with Wilson team for a couple of years now. Excited to be here and help you guys walk you through the loan process and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Assad. Ellie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ellie. I've had my real estate license for 8 years now, and I've been on the team for 2 years, and I'm excited everyone's here and we get to chat about what's going on in the real estate market today.
Thank you, Ellie. Wesley?
How's it going, everybody? My name is Wesley. Been on the team since 2017, and appreciate you guys all joining us today. It's going to be a ton of good information about current events, how the market is affected by the COVID-19, and also the home buying process. So feel free to shoot any questions into the chat box, and looking forward to helping you guys.
Thank you, Wesley. Might have missed some people. I know Hamadrez is here. Elizabeth should be here with us too. Did I miss any of you guys? Thank you. So yeah, why don't we just jump right into it? Thank you for joining us for the home buying webinar. This is a combination of things that we had discussed in our in-person home buying class in Millbrae about a couple weeks ago. And also we have more relevant information in terms of the current market and some stories that we can share with you of some recent people that we've helped get into contract and some of the things that we might anticipate heading into the next couple of months. So if you guys, like I said, have any questions, feel free to type in the chat box. One of our team members will bring it up to the presenter's attention if it's a recurring question. Otherwise, we're definitely going to answer all questions at the end when we have our Q&A. So welcome. By attending this webinar, you're taking an important step towards investing in a secure asset and in real estate. If you guys already have your home, congratulations on having that. If you're looking for your first home, we look forward to helping you with that. If you're looking to build, let's say, a portfolio like what Jenny has, multiple doors and having tenants, obviously cash flow positive, paying on top of your mortgage, that's what we want to help people do. So today we will help you gain a basic understanding of how the home buying process works and discuss market changes we have seen due to COVID-19. And please send any questions you may have in the chat. So what we'll cover today is how the virus is currently affecting showings in the market, some thoughts behind that, how our team is handling showings, where the market is headed, some market seasonality and interest rates, which Assad will touch upon, the home buying process, which of course hasn't really changed much, minus the fact that sometimes we can't really meet together, and the home search and mortgage calculating tools that we can share with you that you could use and run some numbers. And of course, we have Assad here to help us with specific numbers and specific questions if you guys feel open to sharing, and how contingencies might affect an offer, what goes into an offer, and finally Q&A. So I added this slide in at the end because when you think of the situation we're in right now, one way of thinking about it is, you know, how the media portrays fear and what's going on. But what I see and what a lot of mentors and successful people see is opportunity out there. So there might be a short-term period where we're moving into an unknown, and we are currently in an unknown, especially for a lifetime, where we haven't seen something like this take place before, where we're sheltering in place for multiple weeks. I think most people joining us are probably in California somewhere. There's a lot of opportunity, and you know, there's a couple ways to look at it, you know, from a personal standpoint and a business standpoint. And the most important thing that we really need to do right now is make sure that we have our reserves ready. In case there is an opportunity that presents itself, we need to be able to have an opportunity to jump on it, to take advantage of it. So one thing that I want you guys to keep in mind of is as we go through the slides in the presentation, we're going to teach you, of course, yes, the buying process, but I want you to think about opportunity. So here's just some stats to kick us off and some graphs. This is something called showing time, and it's giving us an idea of showings week by week and day by day, 2019 compared to 2020. And I don't know exactly where it's tracking its stats from, but it's showing that there's a sharp decline in showings for obvious reasons. So this is just something to keep in mind. One way of thinking about it is, oh, wow, a lot of people are not touring right now. And another way of thinking about it is, if people are not going to be touring, there's going to be a lot less competition when we're looking for something such as our first home or investment property. I think this is a given just because obviously we have a shelter in place and we're not technically supposed to be, you know, touring properties. It's not considered essential. So there's a lot less showings going on moving into the end of March. This is something that is you can take a lot of information from. So from left to right, we basically have the same graph for different locations. The one on the most left right here is for Santa Clara County. The middle one is San Mateo County. And the one on the right is Alameda and Contra Costa County. So what you're looking at is all of them have a squiggly line, and that line is average listed sales price. The bars, the green bars, are basically average days on market for properties across each respective county on a month-by-month basis. So there's consistency in the data that you'll see in the last 12 months. Last April and so forth, heading into the winter months, the market started to slow down. What slowing down looks like is the listed sales price started averaging to be about 100 to 102% in Santa Clara County. In San Mateo County, it went from about 105.5 all the way down to 101. And in Alameda, Contra Costa, it went from about at the highest time, 104% almost, down to about 101%. So in the last 8 months before 2020 of 19, you saw a lot of trends suggesting that homes were selling for above list price still, but not aggressively. And days on market started to slow down, or started to be a little bit longer as we entered the winter months, which is pretty typical in our market. The big thing that you'll see a spike in activity and a spike in listed sales price was at the beginning of the year, which we all, if you guys were in the industry, saw that people were looking at homes. It was a very competitive market. So we had spikes of up to, on average, right, in Santa Clara County, 104% above list. And that was so far as data. So the data that you're seeing for March in the last graph is actually month to date as of yesterday when we pulled it. So the trends are still showing everything that's closing currently in March. The listed sales price is the most aggressive we've seen in the last 12 months. So before the virus, or even during the situation that we are currently encountering, if you just looked at the stats, you would have no idea that there's showing restrictions, that there's something going on. So what that means for us is, even right now to this day, there's still a lopsided supply and demand. And this will lead to the next slide that we have. So in the next slide, it's still relative. All the way on the left, it's going to be Santa Clara County. The middle is San Mateo County. And then all the way to the right is Alameda and Contra Costa. The red bars are basically month by month, the available inventory for sale. And the green is trending what's actually sold. So red is inventory, green is sold. And as you can see, from April of last year leading to March this year, there's a consistency that the sales and the inventory has been less and less. Clearly, there's a big drastic drop in available inventory in Santa Clara County, also in San Mateo County, and in the East Bay counties, Contra Costa and Alameda. So that is driving prices right now a lot, because if the buyer pool has been consistently higher and growing due to, let's say, lower interest rates, and obviously desirability to live here has never really changed. It's still very desirable. Inventory has changed. The available listings that are coming up on the market has trended less and less month over month in the last 12 months. And that's driving parts of the price increases that we're seeing, and also the competitive nature of the properties that are going into contract. Next is a San Francisco Bay Area real estate cycles overview. What you'll see in the last couple of cycles, when the market tanked, each respective time, it was a small percentage drop relative to the increase of the year before, or the period before. So from 84 on the left to 1990, there was a 100% increase in home values in the Bay Area. And when there was a recession in a cycle, housing prices dropped 11%, only to see another 100% increase from 95 to 01. When the dot-com pop came, there was a 10% decrease in the market for real estate. And from 2002 to 07, it increased another 59%. The biggest actual housing crisis that we've seen in the last couple cycles was obviously 08 to 2011, when it was a financial lending crisis where There were people that were getting qualified for loans that were not supposed to get loans. That was the biggest decrease in home values that we've seen in recent recession history, and that was 27%. And from 2012 to 2017, it's been an estimated 100% increase again. For example, in San Bruno, the studios used to be $125,000. Right now, it's more than $400,000. So that's over 100% increase in the value of a property relative to when it was the lowest at its point about 10 years ago. And of course, from 2018 to 19, we saw a consecutive month dip in home values. And we don't have stats for 2020 currently, but it's gone up, and we're going to see exactly for the full year what's going to happen. At a high level glance of what's going on, if there is a market recession, it doesn't always equate to a housing crisis. I would say if you think about housing crisis, especially in the Bay Area, and especially from San Francisco down to Santa Clara County, there's a limited amount of houses for sale. If anything, the virus has halted a lot of new construction. And even if there was new construction, a lot of new construction is not for sale. It's for rent, it's commercial space. So the desirability to live in the area and to own a property, whether it's a condo, townhouse, or single family, is still there. It's gonna be a lopsided supply and demand dynamic. I think supply is gonna be consistently low. We'll give you some estimations and some educated guesses of what we anticipate for the next couple of months and possibly the year. We do maybe anticipate some fluctuation in the buyer pool, but consistently there's less inventory than there is actually the amount of people looking for housing. So, but here's the graph for you guys to see. If we were to talk about market seasonality suggests that the months of March to August are the hottest times that lean towards a seller's market. And typically speaking, starting February, October, especially the holiday that people kick off the holidays with is Halloween. Starting from Halloween, November, December, and heading into the beginning of the year, typically it's going to be slower or lower activity, which is kind of not what we saw because January and February so far has been quite hot of a market leaning towards the seller's market. So if we were looking at seasonality, disregarding real estate cycles, disregarding what's going on in the marketplace right now where we have a shelter in place, this is what you would typically see. That's why a lot of people are ramping up for the spring and summer market now. However, it's come to a halt, just like so many businesses, because we cannot really operate as much. Although what I can share with you, and Ashley could share, she just got into a contract today and it was a competitive situation. So from what we see out there, from the intel we have from writing offers actively in the current marketplace, it's still a very competitive place to be. Next is historic interest rates. So Jenny, is this something you're going to be talking about, or is this still me?
Yeah, I can dive into this portion. So,
okay, great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Wilson, for kicking off. So right now, interest rates, it's very volatile, but what we do see is an ultimate all-time low. Not sure how old everyone else is on this call, but when my parents were buying a house in the late 70s or early 80s, they were paying about 15% interest rate on their homes. And it was still a very high market. Everyone wants to live in a home. Ultimately, food, shelter, and water are the basic necessities. And they wanted to realize the American dream of owning a home and realizing it's better than paying rent towards their landlord's mortgage. So they took on these loans at 14, 15%. And the all-time high actually hit 16, 17%, if you can see on the chart, around 1981. So right now, interest rates in the last few years have been right around 3 to 4%. It's had hit close to 4.5%, 5% a few years back, but right now we do still see an all-time low around 3.5%, 4%, depending on what type of loan products you'll be looking at. But I'm talking on 30-year fixes right now, and ultimately, other aspects of what caused the recession previously in 2008 to 2012 when prices were extremely low. Prior to that, they had subprime mortgages. So what that meant was we would just go to the bank. Let's say Assad is our lender. I would be like, hey, I make $1 million and here's just some random proof and I want to buy 10 houses. Can I buy 10 houses? Then Assad would just approve it right away. And he'll maybe even make up some numbers. Not saying Assad would, but the banks, the mortgage lenders back then were motivated to sell these type of loans that were adjustable rate mortgages, where they would get in a very low rate, 2%, and then it will fluctuate to 4%. And basically their mortgages would double and then go up to 6%. And they had to basically leave their homes at that time. So right now banks are very, very strict on the lending guidelines, and they also require something called debt to income ratio. So right now, you see, previously there was no debt to income ratio. Right now, debt to income ratio, the maximum is 45 to 50% of what you make. So let's say per month you're making $10,000. So the max debt you can have is $4,500 to $5,000, and that can include all of your mortgage debt, car loans, and student loans. And also previously, banks were approving people with 400, 500 credit scores. Now the minimum credit score usually is around 680 for these type of loans. The lowest we've ever seen is 620, but they do have to put a little more of a down payment down. And then other things that we're looking at right now is regarding COVID-19, how that's going to impact. We do see that potentially it will impact other parts of the country, but being a very seller heavy market here, like where supply and demand, we have very limited supply. So we'll go into the next slide here afterwards. So previously, I'm not sure how much all of you guys are paying for rent right now. And I know some of my friends are paying about $2,500, $3,000 for rent per month for like a 1-bedroom apartment in San Francisco. So let's say for $3,000, the first year, it makes sense. You want to get your bearings down and put in that money. But if you look at a course of over 5 years, what you're spending is $180,000 in just rent, going towards someone else's mortgage and not getting any equity gain or any of those factors. So when I was renting, I was only paying $800 a month, and then I rented out my room half the time and paying $400, but I still had that itch. I was like, oh, why am I paying someone else's mortgage? So I decided to look into getting into real estate. And that's how I met the team with Wilson and looking into investing in properties. So we'll go into the next slide here. So the benefits of buying versus renting. So overall buying, you're able to build equity and credit. Overall, you get the appreciation from your home. I'll share a specific example of my home of when I purchased it in 2016. You'll also get tax breaks. You get $10,000 of property tax deduction and up to $750,000 of your mortgage interest deduction. And you don't have to be forced on lease expirations. We've seen landlords increase rents every year, every other year. So this is, if you get a fixed mortgage, then you'll have the same payment basically every single month. And you can do whatever you want to the home. Get a nice big yard, especially a lot of millennials nowadays buy a home for their dogs rather than their pets. Rather than their kids. So you can get a nice yard and renovate as you please. And overall for renting, you're not going to get any return on investment, and overall landlords are not going to be as inclined to fixing the property, and it's also always very short term. And then we'll go into the next slide afterwards. So nowadays, especially with everything that's going on with the stock market, and I've had some money in my 401k as well too, but we've seen it plummet probably 20, 30, even 40% in the last few weeks. And it made a big hole in my heart from seeing that, but I was actually okay and fine because I realized most of my assets and most of my investments were actually in real estate. So the great things that you're not going to get from stocks or bonds, and especially your savings account, is equity buildup, being able to leverage it, and having this actual secure asset, and also the tax advantages, as I mentioned earlier too. Let's dive into the next slide of my specific example of when I purchased my property. So I bought my property in 2016 in South San Francisco. It's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath home. Bought it at $870,000. What we did was we leveraged a home equity line of credit from my parents' house to put for the down payment, and then got a loan on that by myself. I was working at Oracle at the time and got that loan under my own name. The interest rates were 3.625%. So my monthly payments, what I was paying back to my parents for home equity line of credit, was $1,110. My monthly mortgage principal and interest is around $2,100. Property taxes, depending on which county and city you will be in, but my county is about 1.15% of my purchase price. So that was $835. Insurance per month is $65. So per month, my monthly is $41.10, but I was renting out the other rooms for $12.50 at that time. So overall, my monthly investment to live instead of paying for rent and to someone else's mortgage was only $360 per month. And fast forward to now in March 2020, my current value of my property has increased to $1.25 million. So that is an equity gain of $380,000. So basically what I put for the down payment, I already made in less than 4 years in just equity value. And my loan, I paid down the loan from $470 down to $420, but most of it was paid down from the rent that I was getting from my other roommates. And then my monthly payment's still the same. I didn't incur any increase of monthly, as if I were renting somewhere else, I would probably want it to get some into a different place. So my monthly would have probably been like $3,000 per month for rent. So what right now the potential rental income for my house, like as rent has increased, is $1,350 a month. And if I rent out all 4 rooms, I'm able to get $1,290 of cash flow. And leveraging that $15,000 per year, we'll be able to purchase other investment properties. So that's what we've been able to do, because I'm saving so much on rent, been able to buy other properties out of state as cash flowing properties out of area. So we can have another webinar in the future about that specifically. And then right now I'm in the process of actually going through a refinance. I can also take a home equity line of credit, but rates are very low right now. So be able to pull that money out to reinvest or make improvements to my home or pay off my other debts and such. And options could also be to Airbnb, renting it out for even higher. So that's a lot of the leverage that you can get from real estate and house hacking.
Hey, Jenny, we have a question from JQ in regards to the interest tax deductions.
Mm-hmm. It is for the first $750,000, but we're not tax professionals, so definitely double check, but it is the mortgage tax deduction from what interest you've paid on the $750K. So if you buy $1 million property, put 25% down, and the loan is $750,000, your monthly, like what you will be paying, you'll be able to deduct that from your overall income to go in a slightly, not in a lower tax bracket, but not have to pay on that. So to give you an example, for me, like my loan was only $470, so I'm able to deduct all of that for the mortgage interest. So my deduction was probably about $18,000 from my basically from my tax returns. So I was able to minus that, so I don't have to pay like 30-40% on $18,000. A great question.
Hey, Jenny, I know recently you were talking about refinancing too. Were you able to follow through on a refinance?
I'm in the process right now with Assad.
Awesome. And is the goal to take some cash out and have that liquid so you can make an investment? What's your thought process right now for the refinance?
Yeah, so there's a lot of options from there where overall there could be improvements made to my house, could make some other pay off like all of the home equity line of credit from my parents, make some other investments as well too. So buy out of state rental properties. So we still are waiting to finalize on those details, but those are some of the options that people can have from there. Thanks. And then we'll go into the next slide. So going over the home buying process, whether you're looking here locally or wherever you guys live, it's very important to meet with a real estate agent to really understand what type of home you're looking for and really guide you through the whole process. Yes, so you can go online and look at certain homes, but there's so many intricacies into it that we want to make sure that you are making a sound and safe investment. So we have a great team here. So go into the next slide. So I know not everyone is here on the call from the Bay Area, but we here on our team, we cover all of the Bay Area. Ellie's gone as far as Marin County up to Petaluma. Ashley has and I have gone down to San Jose, Santa Clara area, and we do all up on San Francisco down to the peninsula, and then out to the East Bay, Contra Costa, Pleasant Hill, Concord, Emeryville. So that's the areas we do cover. If it's out of area, I know we have a great agent down out east in another 30 under 30 realtor, Rachel Major. She's out in Grand Rapids, Michigan, so she can chat with you about investment properties potentially out there. But we'll dive into the next slide. I'll pass it on to Assad. Afterwards, after meeting with an agent, it's really important to get pre-approved to see what you can qualify for.
Thanks, Jenny. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. So as Wilson was mentioning, there is a lot of opportunity right now in the market because there's going to be less competition. And one of the things everybody can do is to set them up for that is prepare yourself by getting pre-approved and help get any of your questions and concerns answered. And we're all here happy to do that. In regards to the pre-approval, before I dive in too deep on it, I wanted to let you know that there are two types of pre-approvals. The first one being from the mortgage banker, such as myself. It will be our job to review your application and documentation thoroughly and let you know how much you could potentially qualify for and issue you a pre-approval letter. So that's the first type. Sometimes that's also called a pre-qualification letter. The second type of approval letter is the stronger letter. It holds more water. It's called the conditional underwritten approval. A lot of banks don't offer that right now because it's taking up too much time from their operations team to submit an approval request for a buyer who hasn't even found a property. Our bank, US Bank, we're still offering underwritten conditional approvals, and the benefit of that type of approval is that your file actually gets in front of the person who can sign off and clear your conditions. So when you have that in hand, you have more peace of mind. Your offer is going to look much stronger with the sellers and the listing agent. And you can also go in with stronger terms, much faster close of escrow period, and potentially waiving contingencies, loan contingencies specifically. So we can discuss that a little bit later if you have any questions around it during the Q&A. I'll go ahead and touch a little bit on each of these topics on the presentation. So the first one is the income. So that's all of these topics over here are areas that the underwriter is going to look at and determine how much purchasing power you have. So the first one is your income, and the source of income that we'll be able to use is, of course, your base salary. That's the first one. And we can also include bonus income as well as restricted stock unit income. If you are in the technology sector, a lot of companies do offer that as an option, and we're able to consider that. Around the income, what we look for is 2 years employment in the same profession. So if you've changed employers, that's acceptable, totally fine. As long as you've been working in the same field, in the same profession for 2 years, that's what the requirement is. If some of you are recent graduates from college and you just started working in the past let's say 3 months or 6 months, that's acceptable as well. Your education or your recent graduation will be a continuation, and we can just use your current employment, whether it's a few months or 6 months or a year. So in regards to the income, also we look at the gross income before taxes are taken out. So that will help us determine how much you can qualify for in conjunction with the next bullet point over here, which is your debts. So what we look for on the debts is if you have any current revolving expenses on your credit report. So for example, it's going to be student loans, auto loans, maybe credit cards, things of that nature, and whatever the minimum payments are on those. In addition to that, we look at what the projected housing payment is going to be on the new home you're looking to buy. Jenny earlier mentioned DTI, debt to income ratio, and this is how it's calculated. So we take into consideration, again, the projected housing payment, mortgage, property taxes, insurance, plus any revolving debt you have, and then we divide that by your gross income. Gross income, again, being base salary plus bonus plus RSU, if any of those are applicable for you. And then that ratio needs to be below a certain percentage. Depending on the loan program, it could be anywhere from 43% to 50%. Okay, so that is the current debts. And then in terms of the credit history, there's a few different loan programs out there. Some of them are a lot more flexible in their guidelines for how much credit is required. Some are a little bit more restrictive, but we have a lot of options for you. We have options with credit scores as low as 640. We have options for borrowers who, for example, have just one credit card open for 12 months. So you don't have a lot of credit history. That wouldn't be a problem. We would still be able to help find financing for you as well. All right, so that takes care of the income, current debts, and credit history. And our next bullet point is assets and funds. So this represents your portion of the down payment. So the bank is going to finance X amount of your purchase price, and then you have to come in with some of that down payment as well. That down payment could be your personal funds, or it could also be gift funds from family. So those options are available for you to get a gift from a family if that's available. Otherwise, if it's personal funds, it could be your liquid funds. If you have stocks, if you're going to be selling that, that's acceptable. And besides the down payment, the lender also requires an emergency cushion, also called reserves. So we want to make sure you have some money in the bank in case there's an emergency, you have to take some time off of work. Depending on which program you go for, the reserves could be no reserves actually, or all the way up to 12 months reserves. So that again depends on your loan program and how much loan you're looking to borrow. The reserves could also come from retirement accounts. So if you have a 401k or an IRA, we can consider reserves from them as well. And then finally, the last icon here is the market value of the property that you're purchasing. So the lender is going to do an appraisal on the property, and that's there to protect you as the buyer, to make sure what you're paying for the property is market value, and it also protects the lender. The appraiser is an independent third party. They're not related to the bank. So there's no influence from us. There's no influence from the realtors or the buyers. And they would do the inspection and determine the market value of the property.
Hey, Assad, quick question before you move on to the next slide.
Sure.
That's pertinent to these bullet points. One from CT saying is, how are private company RSUs valued for DTI?
Okay. So private company RSU is not going to be acceptable. It has to be a publicly traded company for that reason, because it's privately held, so it's hard to determine what the value of the shares would be. So it would have to be publicly traded.
One from Jay, is 401k considered as far as assets go?
It is, yeah. So we can use your 401k for reserve purposes. 70% of the vested value of your 401k can be used. And then you may know yourself that you could withdraw a loan from your 401k. So some of my clients do that to help them with the down payment or closing costs. The general rule is that you can take up to 50% of the vested balance as a loan to a maximum of $50,000.
Got it. Two more here. One from Jeff. Are there any types of income that does not get taken into consideration? For instance, if they're house hacking, renting out bedrooms in their house, does that get counted?
The main thing to consider about what income that we can use is as long as it can be documented. So if it's been filed on your tax returns, if you have, it's in the lending world, if you're renting out a room and you're living in it, it's called border income. So if you have that and it's filed on your tax returns for at least 2 years, then we will be able to use that. Anything that's cash related, if you're getting income through cash, that can't be used.
And the final one that I see for this slide, it's a personal question for you. Are you finding that the pre-approval process for you is being delayed due to low interest rates and now the COVID-19 because they're not sure if your lenders are being considered as essential businesses during this time?
So that's a good question. As I mentioned earlier, there's two types of pre-approval letters. So the letter that I give you, I can generate that very quickly, probably within 24 hours of you submitting your application and your documents to me. I've been in the business over 15 years, so I actually take my time to underwrite your file. So I do a very thorough job to make sure that you really do qualify for the loan. It's just I don't have signing authority, so I can't clear your conditions. So I would be able to give you my letter within 24 hours. And then in terms of getting the underwritten conditional approval, that takes about 5 to 7 business days. So I would transition your file simultaneously to get the underwritten approval while giving you my pre-approval letter as well.
Thank you, Assad.
Sure.
By the way, we have some common questions on the screen too, so if you can review those and share with the audience.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the first one is a loaded question because the last 5 to 6 weeks has been crazy with the market and what the Fed has been trying to do to stimulate the economy again. Obviously everybody knows that the Fed cut the rate a couple of times and then they cut the Fed funds rate to 0. When that happened, I got probably instantaneously over 10 to 15 texts. It was on a Sunday, asking if mortgage rates were going to be cut to 0 as well. That would be amazing if it was, but unfortunately it's not. The Fed funds rate has nothing to do with mortgage rates. Fed funds rate is the rate that banks lend money to each other overnight. So it doesn't affect the mortgage rates in the short term immediately, but from my experience, it does trickle down after several months. So hopefully once there's more stability in the market and more certainty, there's a chance that rates potentially, could improve compared to where they're at today. Over the last couple of weeks, though, rates have been very cyclical. They did go up significantly about 7 to 10 days ago. And that was primarily because of the fears of what's been going on in the whole world with the COVID-19. In the bond market, mortgage-backed securities market, there was a lot of dumping or selling off of those securities. And earlier this week, the Fed announced that they would have an unlimited purchasing ability. They would buy unlimited amounts of mortgage-backed securities and bonds. So that helped restabilize mortgage rates. So rates right now, a long answer to your questions are purchase rates are still very, very attractive right now. Refinance rates have gone up a little bit compared to where they were a couple of weeks ago. Just to give you a sense of what rates are at, 30-year fixed right now, if you're doing a 10% down, is going to be anywhere from 3.25% to 3.375%. So that's if you're doing 10%, 10 to 20% down in that range. That's where the 30-year fixed is, and having a rate in the low 3s right now on a 30-year fix is definitely a very good interest rate. So the next question is turnaround times. U.S. Bank has local operations in Campbell, so that's where our operations team is at, our underwriting. And I don't want to brag, but we have an amazing operations team. Considering all the volume we've had early February and everything that's been going on, we're still able to close purchase transactions in 21 days. So it hasn't affected our turn times. I work very closely with you to put together a full package. That's what helps us close loans fast and try to do all of the due diligence ahead of time before you find a property. So that way, when you are in contract, you don't have that stress of having to chase conditions and documents. So by working together and with our operations team, we're easily able to close loans still in 21 days. Appraiser trends. Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of lenders are still trying to adjust and acclimate to what's going on with the lockdown. Some areas appraisers may not have access to properties, or they might be doing drive-bys. As of right now, it hasn't affected our business model. Our appraisers are still able to get into properties, and I haven't seen any impact on value. Value is still coming in at purchase price. If there was any shift in the market, it would be industry-wide, and we would adjust accordingly. But as of right now, it's business as usual for appraisals. And then employment status effects. I'm assuming maybe that question could mean if you're working from home, or if you've had to take some time off from work. I don't know, Wilson, could you clarify on that question?
I actually wasn't the one that typed this in.
Okay, no worries.
Situation. I think Wesley brought it up in regards to an employment change that happened for someone's escrow.
Yeah, so it's not one of my clients directly, but essentially we had written an offer for a property in Concord actually last month, and unfortunately my client did not win that home, but the buyers that did get their offer accepted got into the escrow period. They were 2/3 of the way into getting the keys for their property, but unfortunately one of the buyers actually got laid off. And unfortunately, this has been somewhat of a trend that we've seen, where there are a few buyers directly affected in their employment status with their company and not being able to perform on their loans, on their contracts. And it's an unfortunate situation, but it is something that we've been seeing. And it could be something that within the next week or two will continue, just because there have been a lot of talks about potential layoffs. So just something to keep in mind, something to account for when you are deciding when you are going to make your purchase.
Assad, if you could speak on how your team and your company would have the workaround with that to kind of bring some hope to the situation, if not.
Sure. So one thing U.S. Bank has done recently, it was actually just announced today by Governor Gavin Newsom, is that we're one of, I believe, 3 lenders that are providing a 90-day forbearance for any one of our consumers or clients that have a mortgage with us. So if they've been affected in any way by the lockdown, not being able to work, there's a 90-day forbearance on them having to make their mortgage payments. So the bank very much understands it's a very difficult time for many, and they may not be able to get to work. That's why they implemented that, so the consumers would not get a hit on their credit rating or any late fees as well. So we've always been ranked as one of the most ethical banks several years in a row, and I'm very proud of the bank that they were able to implement something like that.
Yeah, and I guess maybe to Wesley's point too, on your side of it, you as a loan officer and your colleagues, have you seen any files not be fulfilled, or anything such as people obviously losing their roles? I know this is a sensitive topic, but have you seen any sort of trends in that? Assad, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, I thought you said Wesley.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Assad. Have you seen any trends or heard of from any lenders?
In terms of clients being impacted in the middle of the process, losing employment through layoff or anything like that, no. I haven't seen or heard of any files within our team or within the industry as of late, no.
Okay, appreciate your feedback.
Sure.
Assad, we do have a question from Athena. If you happen to be laid off and getting EDD, will this affect the refinance later on or getting a loan? Will the lender think this is a job insecurity?
Yeah, so if you are in the middle of a transaction, every lender, it's standard that they would do a final verification of employment before closing. If you are laid off, I mean, I don't know if anything is going to change recently now because of COVID-19, but speaking as of how things were prior to this, the loan would not be able to go through. But like I said, I don't know if we will be implementing any changes if the layoff is due to COVID-19. That's
Thanks for
something
the
I could,
insight.
that's something I could look into and get back to the team on.
No more questions on the chat for now.
Okay. Thank
We'll
you.
move forward.
Yeah.
Thank you, Assad.
Thank you.
So I can dive into this portion regarding how much you can take a look at before getting pre-approved on how much you can properly borrow. So I'm going to take over the screen sharing really quickly. Okay. Can everyone see my screen? So
See your screen.
we go to our good friend Google and search Zillow, how much house can I afford? And this is just an initial pre-qualification without talking to a lender. It's not as detailed as it, but it just gives you a good idea of where to start off with. So let's say you're making $150,000 per year and you have, let's say, $250 per month in car payment debts. And if you have $150,000 for your down payment, the max debt to income ratio is 45 to 50%, but we'll just be on the safer side with 43%. And interest rates right now, Assad, what are interest rates for a 30-year fix?
3.25.
3.25, awesome. So 3.25% for 30-year fix. Property taxes, so we're going to include taxes and insurance. We usually see between 1 to 1.2% for property tax here. So we'll just go on the higher end. Per year, you're going to use the home insurance is going to be $800 roughly per year. Most programs, Assad, I know he can do 10% up to probably $1 million without having to do any PMI. So a lot of people ask, hey, do we need 20% down? But no, you technically don't need 20% down. There's programs at 3.5% for FHA. There's 5%, 10%. So right now we do recommend if you don't need to put in all the cash for the down payment, then it would make sense to maybe save some of that, get a slightly lower down payment, 10, 15, 20% versus putting 30, 40%, just so you have more cash on hand, because that extra 10% could pay for upwards of 15 to 20 months of additional mortgage. So what we're looking at, if you make $150,000 by yourself, then you would be able to qualify for a loan, a home for up to $977,000, and what your monthly payment will be roughly this. But we're not going to have PMI though, so it'll be $5,125, and you can actually qualify for over $1 million of a home currently. So this is just basic if you have good credit and everything, but without looking at any other details. So that's just an initial search for you to look at. I'm going to stop my share and give it back to Wilson.
While Wilson's pulling that up, I'll get started on the next topic, which is the best part of real estate, looking for that perfect home. So I'm going to actually call out on some people. So just remember to unmute yourself if I call you out. But just want to talk about some considerations when you guys are looking for that home and what that looks like for you guys. So I think we have Lenos and Alicia on the line. Do you guys mind joining us and sharing a little bit about what's important in the house that or condo or townhome that you guys are looking for?
Yeah, we are really just like initially doing research on what home buying would look like for us. I don't think we're really ready at the moment, but I mean, ideally we're looking for a family home. So.
Ashley
I think Ashley might have just froze there.
Oh.
Sorry, can you guys hear me?
We hear
There we
you.
go.
Can you guys hear us?
Yes.
Yep, we hear you.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so we're ideally just, I think, and hopefully the next like few years we'll want a family home that we can kind of grow into and have kids with. So
Yeah, we had been working in San Francisco actually for the past 4 years, and took a sabbatical, traveled for the second half of 2019, and actually recently moved to New York just before everything went down. So we're back up picking up our career again. So like my wife was saying, just probably just looking into it right now, trying to assess the market, understand things. Obviously, buying a home is very like critical and important. And Jenny was making some great points in terms of it being a valuable asset. So it's just for us trying to understand it right now as we continue to work for the next couple of years. And then when we're ready to buy a home, ideally a single family home, and obviously be well educated so we're operating it nicely.
Love that. Thanks so much for sharing. Hopefully Ashley can join us and she can connect again. You know, we can share some stories of conversations we've recently had with initial discovery calls too. And maybe Hassam and Wesley, we recently had a call where someone had reached out to us and share some of the things that were important to them. One thing I want you guys to keep in mind is people are still reaching out, people are still asking questions, people still want to live somewhere, clearly. And their choices are renting, or if that's the best case scenario, or like what you guys had just said, getting to a better place. So maybe a year or even sooner or later, the goal is to be able to purchase something for your own. So regardless of what's going on in the market. Sure, Wes?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing, Lisa and Linda, a little bit about your story and your background. What are some things in terms of, say, the location and the size that you're looking for? Any feng shui that you believe in, death on the property, that's a no for you?
I'll let my wife answer, because if I answer, she might kill me. So you can answer the questions.
No, not at all. No, I think we definitely are into like open spaces, open layouts. Like ideally want some sort of like yard space in the suburbs. Yeah.
It'll probably be close to
good schools in the neighborhood.
Close to. I mean, in California, ideally, my wife's family's from LA and my family's from London. Just in terms of like location, we'll probably end up staying in the States, so it'll probably be in California. Well, yeah. I mean, highly likely we'll be in California, so we can be close to family too. So when we get to that stage in life where we want to settle down and like have kids and stuff like that, it will probably be around California that we would be looking for a home.
Yeah, I mean, probably something like super modern. Yeah.
What she said.
Stylish, yeah. Very just like ultra modern.
I know a few realtors in California that can help you when you move back over here. And hope you're staying safe in New York.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah.
Your feedback and joining us. And let's go to the next slide, please. So these are some tools, public tools that I'm sure you've seen that Redfin's a really good tool that we like to use as well. We have Real Scout that we set our clients up with searches that match their criteria. And then Trulia is a really good one too if you're looking for rents and how much they're going for in the area in case you're thinking about house hacking like Jenny. And also they have crime maps and statistics on Trulia. They have hotspot maps, so you can look at a whole page of a breakdown of what's going on neighborhood by neighborhood. And yeah, these are good starting points. I think once you really start diving into the offer, you're going to need a real estate team that's going to go into detail of what the recent solds look like. Next slide, please. And then these are some of our tools that are specific to the clients that we work with. We have the Top Agent Network. That's a network where the 1% of the agents in this area post off-market listings, and we create opportunities that are less competitive for our clients. And so that's really helpful. I know that in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, sometimes around last summer, we were bidding against 20 offers. So sometimes it is nice to have these off-market opportunities. They're usually there because the seller might not want traffic. They have a baby that needs sleeping. They don't want open houses. They don't want their nosy neighbors to know about their open house or going through a hardship in the family. So there's times when you can find opportunities like that are really good. And agent relationships. So you know, when you are negotiating, when we are representing you, our relationships with other agents come into play in terms of when you have 20 offers, many of them end up being close in price. So our relationship with the agent is going to matter. And we definitely have a reputation in this area, and that's something that pushes our offer forward as well. And same thing with our brokerage, the name, and we also go door knocking. Not in this time that we're going in, we're not door knocking right now, but we're hosting things like this, the virtual seminars, and still wanted to connect with you and be part of the community. But door knocking, we're able to establish those relationships with sellers as well and get more listings for our buyers as well. And the next slide, please.
Ellie, I'll take over for you just to talk a little bit. Sorry, I lost you guys there for a minute.
Welcome back.
Exactly. Thank you.
Guys. So I wanted to share, I think Wilson had touched on it a little bit earlier. I currently did get an escrow today to where our clients were in a competitive offer, and Ellie and I were actually talking before we got on this call that she had a client that was looking at the house that our clients got the offer accepted today. So because inventory is low, there's a lot of clients that are looking at the same properties, and we were in a competitive situation. But a lot of people are questioning now, how do we see the house? And so Assad touched on it earlier. What we're asking of the clients that we're working with is that they're getting that first step and getting that pre-approval and talking with their lender and getting that all set so that if we do see a property and go out there and we're taking the appropriate precautions, we want to make sure that we're looking at a house that is of high interest of yours. So what we've been doing is taking the appropriate precautions, and if we are going to look at a property, I'll bring along, if you don't have some, I have some hand sanitizer that I stocked up on. My mom actually shipped from Indiana. And then we'll want to have gloves and our mask and disinfectant wipes where we're wiping down all the door handles before you guys arrive. There are other options to look at the property. We could go to the property individually. I could go there and do a FaceTime with you if you have potentially family members that it could be at a higher risk, and we could FaceTime. And then there's also options of virtual tours, which are 3D virtual tours where you can actually tour the home from the safety of your own house while we're in this shelter in place. So our number one is always going to be your guys' health and making sure that we are taking all the precautions to make sure everyone's staying safe during this time. But we do want to do whatever we can to make sure that you guys are able to see the home. And so something that I did with my clients actually was we had seen the property quickly over the weekend before we submitted the offer, but we did add, and Wesley, I believe, is going to dive into contingencies, but we added a 3-day inspection contingency to allow us to go back to that property just one last time to take a look today. So we actually went to the property today, and they're now even more excited about the home. So just some different strategies that we've been using in this current market due to the COVID-19.
If I may add to, we make up one side of the equation where there's going to be some buyers that are reluctant to go out or reluctant to tour, and there's going to be some buyers that have urgency to find something. That's one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is the sellers that we're touring homes for. Now, depending on if it's occupied or if it's not, there's some limitations. If you just purely look at supply and demand, some people are just reluctant to show their homes or hit the market, or if they've taken it off. Some of the things that we've seen from the MLSs across the board have stopped days on market. So days on market are paused right now, and a lot of people are withdrawing their listings or they're leaving it up there, but the countdown for the daily days on market is not tallying right now. And it's, I believe, temporarily until the 7th. So just some thoughts out there too. So clearly from what Ashley had said, some of the things that Wesley and some of our other team members have encountered, people are still out there looking. They want to buy something. There's limitations on what's available.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback off that real quick before Ashley, you keep going. I spoke to our brokerage today and got some live stats that we're averaging about 16 to 17 escrows a day right now for our brokerage. And not only that, but we have about 1,000 pending currently right now, total combined with all our partners and our brokerage. So if you think about the rate of 16 per day across the board, given everything that's going on, people are still taking that lunge and moving forward. So those are pretty strong stats given everything that we've been seeing. Just thought I'd share.
Thanks, Hassan. So we'll continue with
here.
Yep, thanks, Allie.
Well, so a little bit more about the offer process. Once you see a house that you love and you want to know more about, some things that will go into the purchase price will be the disclosures, the similar solds in the area will give you an idea of the fair market value, and the way that your offer is prepared. And what I mean is by the contingencies and whether your offer looks complete and has also a love letter there to share your story. Like, as I mentioned, it's very competitive in this area, and these things I'll go over in the next slides as we are adjusting a bit to adhere to what's going on right now. The next slide, please. So for the purchase price and the down payment, so the down payment is typically what we see is about 20% down. There are other programs that can vary from, we've seen up to 5% to 15% down payments. And those are gonna vary based on your profile, your purchase price, your credit score, and your debt to income, whether you qualify for those types of programs. And so the down payment is in relation to the purchase price. And then next slide, please. So for the pre-approval and the proof of funds, I know Assad dove into this earlier, and basically we have to have that letter attached, and hopefully by then it is underwritten, pre-approved. That way we know that all of our ducks are in a row and that we can definitely qualify and not have any hiccups through the escrow process. Any of your assets showing that you have the down payment. It's just giving the seller, when you are submitting a complete package, it's showing the seller that, hey, this person does have the funds in order to go through the, say, 21 days of escrow. And the next slide, please. So the three contingencies are the financing contingency or the loan contingency, the appraisal contingency, and the inspection contingency. So for the loan contingency, as Assad mentioned earlier, if you have that underwritten pre-approval, we know that as long as you don't go buy a car while you're searching for the homes and that's going to affect your debt to income ratio, you're going to be good in the terms of waiving that contingency. And what I mean by waiving it, every home will be different. And we'll go through whether you need to have any of these contingencies by a case-by-case scenarios. But typically what we have seen in the market is that non-contingent offers are usually the winning offers. But we'll always advise you on your safe zones there. In terms of the appraisal contingency, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe Ellie, you can talk a little more about the inspection contingency being a tool for us, especially during this time when some of the touring might not be as convenient.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll dive into that getting there. And so the next one for the appraisal contingency, basically what goes in hand with this is when we're reviewing the recent solds in the neighborhood, that's going to give us an idea of the fair market value. So as long as we're staying within that fair market value of the last recent sold, we typically will be in the safe zone to waive this appraisal contingency. Times I've seen the appraisal contingency is, say, in a very competitive situation as it was last summer. You have 20 offers, you really want to win the home, and the client has only 10% down. That might go significantly higher than the last recent sold. And the bank basically sends an appraiser during the escrow time to make sure that, hey, what they're lending on has enough cash behind it. So as long as there's no hiccups there, you're usually good. Since we are getting you a good deal for the house, we're not advising you to overpay. So we don't really see appraisal issues as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to write in the chat. I know this can be a lot of information, especially for first-time home buyers. We're here to help. And the next one is the inspection contingency. And this is changing a little bit. We are seeing in our market, typically we see that the sellers have the inspection reports given up front. However, we're seeing that since inspectors are holding off going to the properties with the shutdowns, we are having to write contingent upon our buyers getting that inspection done. So typically we'll write about a 15-day. We'll call to different inspection companies to see if they are still working during this time. Did that answer your question, Wilson? Or what you wanted to discuss? Okay, great. Yeah, so I know it says here it happens 5 to 7 business days. Like, as I said, we're not really sure which ones are working right now, so it might take a little bit longer. It might be a longer contingency at this time. And next slide, please. So another aspect of the offer writing is that love letter. We've had a lot of experiences when even in this time, I know Ashley wrote on her offer over in East Bay, there was 2 other offers going against them. Basically, this is an emotional process for even the seller. At times, they have lived in the property for quite some time as well. So you want to make that connection. So next slide. So these are some of the tips. I always advise when you do go into the home, we won't be together at this time since we're going in separate groups. Look for things that catch your eye, that maybe they chose the remodel finishes. You see a swing in the back, and how can you adapt your letter to talk about some of those unique features in the home that will help you to make that connection with the seller? Because if there are other offers on the table and they tend to be very similar in price, since we're all looking at the same recent sold, it's like, how can you stand out? And it's writing a little bit about your story and standing out. And they'll look at this full package, which is your purchase price, your contingencies, your proof of funds, and the love letter. And next slide. And then Hussam, I believe, will be talking about negotiations next.
Wesley's going to chime in, but before we do, Wesley, just a quick question for Assad that we have from our attendees. Jay wants to know, Assad, should we wait a certain amount of time in between mortgage refi loans, and how will this impact credit scores?
So I'm assuming I'm assuming maybe they mean if they currently have a primary residence and you're refinancing that and looking to purchase maybe a new primary residence or an investment property.
Jay, if you want to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and clarify.
Okay. Hey, Assad.
Hey.
So I did a refinance on my primary residence. Did a cash out refinance and did my first payment in October. Right now, I'm in a position to buy another house. So I wanted to know, that's what I'm trying to do, is trying to buy another house, but I wanted to know how will, since it's a short amount of time between my last refinance and then I'm going into a mortgage or, trying to get a mortgage loan, how will that impact my credit? Or is there like usually a rule of thumb on a waiting period in between loans, or, I just kind of want to get your take on that.
It shouldn't impact your credit too much as long as there hasn't been any negative things that have appeared on your credit since then. The inquiry by itself won't be too significant. Potentially, it could lower your score maybe anywhere from like 3 to 5 points, but you should be okay. If you wanted to apply for another mortgage to purchase another property, there's really no general rule that you need to wait a certain number of months for it not to impact your credit.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
There was a question that came in that Jenny also answered, just so everyone knows. It was in regards to the love letter that Ellie went through. If the seller is in a trust, does a love letter make a difference? And per Jenny's answer, it definitely does. There's still an emotional tie to each home that the family member is attached to that trust. So having a letter handy for anyone that might be reading your offer can definitely make a difference. So thanks, Jenny, for chiming in. No more questions, you guys. You guys can move on.
Awesome. Thanks, Ellie, for sharing the portion about the offer package. Now, once you have all that ready to go and we submit the offer, there is a potential that we reach a point where we have to negotiate with the sellers and the listing agent. And what that means is basically, we've provided an offer, we have our price, we have our terms, and present it to the sellers. Once they see it, they may have another point of view, another perspective, or perhaps even a couple small minor requests. And during this time is really where your agent is going to be opening communications with the selling side and really just diving into how to make this a win-win situation for everybody. And there are two types of counter offers should the sellers decide to counter your offer versus accepting or rejecting it. One being a single counter offer and another being the multiple counter offer. The difference between the two is really just the amount of people or parties that the seller is countering. So think of it as if there were 5 offers on a table on one property, and the seller out of the 5 decides, hey, there's one offer that really stands out, but they're missing just one little thing. So let's just send out one single counter to this one group of buyers and see, what terms we can come up with. The second situation is a multiple counter offer where potentially of the 5 offers that are being submitted, that there could be 2 or 3 or even all 5 buyers are receiving a counter offer to make adjustments to things like their price or their terms or close escrow dates, contingency periods, anything like that. And this is really where some of our expertise comes into, because we do a fair amount of volume in this area. So we've, one, likely already built a good relationship with this agent, and 2, we know how to package the offer to make it as presentable as possible, but still keep certain strategies in mind for you guys as buyers, because we do want to make sure we protect your interests, number one. And that's kind of where the agent relationship on the bottom of the screen that you see kind of ties into everything. Is communication with the sellers and the listing agents going to be very key through all of this, because before we even get to this point, usually we've already asked a lot of deep diving questions as far as, well, why are the sellers even selling? Are they looking to relocate? Are they downsizing? Are they upsizing? Why are they selling this home? And based off that information, and also based off the comparable sales in the neighborhood, we're able to price the home in the correct, range that it's supposed to be in, and at the same time still be able to present something that is a win-win for both parties. Can someone do the next slide, please? Awesome, thank you. So once your offer gets accepted, there's a few terms that we do want you guys to be aware of. Title is going to be the first term, and really what this is it is how you as an individual, or perhaps multiple individuals or a married couple, hold title to a property. And a couple terms that you will likely be coming across will be vesting options, which essentially decides, well, let's say me and my wife, we own this property, and should something happen to us, what happens to the property to avoid it going into probate and having the courts take over. So I personally have a child. I have a daughter who's in the 3rd grade. So, when we selected our vesting options, we did make sure to keep her in mind so that if something were to happen to us, knock on wood, that she's still protected throughout sorry, did you want to say something? No? Okay, throughout the whole process. So that's what title is. The second term that you will likely be hearing a lot, and we've actually already mentioned it a lot today, is the escrow process. So think of escrow as 2 things. Is one, from the time that you get your offer accepted to the time that you have keys in hand. Okay, that is your escrow period. And at the same time, there will be a company, escrow company, that comes in and says, well, they are a third-party mediator between buyer and seller. So because you guys never really directly talk with each other, the escrow company will, have a representative step in and make sure that all the contracts are in the correct order. You have all the necessary documentation. As a buyer, all the terms that you mentioned on the contract match your loan application and things like that. So this is where really you guys as buyers may not have as much work to do, but this is the period where Assad, as the lender, is actually making sure that everything on your loan looks good and you are able to proceed with the transaction. And the final term is the earnest money deposit. So what this is a 3% based off of your purchase price that is submitted within the first 3 business days. And keep in mind, this 3% does not go directly to the sellers. What it does is it is transferred into an escrow account, which of course acts as a third-party mediator, and they will hold the funds until you actually close escrow, and they will distribute it accordingly. So this is something, the earnest money deposit, one strategy that we have seen being used in the past, I would say 6 to 12 months, is that 3% is just the industry standard. Some people do like to go a little bit higher. If it, showing the purpose of it going higher, is to show the sellers that you have a really strong intent of purchasing this property, that you're willing to put more cash up front. And this is one of the many strategies that we typically use and explore with our buyers should we need to be a little bit more aggressive with our offer. And another way to make that offer more aggressive is to shrink that time frame. Instead of 3 business days, we may do 24 hours or 48 hours. And really what it does is it just shows the sellers that you have a very strong intent to win this property. And this are just 1 and 2 minor things on the contract. But honestly, it's a lot of agents out there don't really consider things like this. They just do the industry standard and randomly fill it out, But for us, we do kind of like to dive into every single detail on that contract to see what would be the best case scenario. Next slide, please. And the closing process. So a couple things to keep in mind. You will always need to have home insurance. It is a requirement. And before you actually do get your keys, you and your agent will do a final walkthrough of the property. And why this is important is because if 1, the seller still lives there, or 2, they're staging the property, you want to make sure that they do not damage the property as they move out. So we'll make sure to set some time aside with you guys as buyers to go and take a look at the home one last time before you actually close escrow and sign your documents. But once that's done, you will meet with the title company to sign all the closing documentation, sign the loan package, and then you will meet your agent to get the keys. And we have a little picture here of a small little welcome home gift that we included, or Jenny included for one of her clients. But yeah, that's pretty much it. As far as the closing, it's a pretty seamless process. And the good thing about working with WLREA on this is we do have a transaction coordinator in-house. Her name's Kathy Nguyen. You may have seen her in some of our previous posts, but really the purpose of her role is to make sure that this entire closing from the day your offer gets accepted to the day that you get your keys is as seamless and easy for you guys as possible.
Great, thanks, Wesley. And just quickly, we're on social. You can follow us. We have a full-time videographer. His name is Hamid Reza. He's probably here with us on this call too. And we'll be putting out a lot more content. If you guys have ideas, feel free to shoot that over. And last is some predictions and some thoughts. First is we probably will see a spike in the inventory coming out of the shelter in place, given that I think a lot of people have been holding off or withdrawing their listings that were originally on there, just because showings are harder and harder to establish. Secondly is our local market we anticipate to display still a lower supply and a higher demand dynamic. Yes, there will be fluctuations based on, you know, people's jobs and inventory coming out right afterwards. But overall, I think it's going to still be a low supply, high demand dynamic. This could be a recession. However, it's not necessarily a housing crisis, as we've seen only 2 of the last, I would say, 5 or 6 times there was a recession. It was actually a housing crisis, including the last one in 2008 when it was basically bad loans. And then people who have liquid reserves will be able to take advantage of opportunity in the next several months. I think if you have liquid reserves, there's still people out there that have to do something and have to sell. There's going to be less competition, especially during this time in the marketplace when people are a little bit more fearful and more risk adverse. And if anything, local tech companies are flourishing. There's more people spending more screen time, right? People are more using their devices, are using their computers a lot more right now. So just some thoughts. Any other predictions from our team members here? Assad, any comments too?
I agree with that, and I think interest rates will hopefully stay stable for the long-term future as well. I'd say at least over the next 12 to 18 months. Yeah, so the rates will be hopefully competitive, and like you said, the inventory will be a little bit better. So it's a good opportunity for buyers to take advantage of.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Assad. And we're also happy to do one-on-one sessions virtually with you guys to understand what your specific goals are, what you're looking for a home, if you have a dog, and how many kids and all that stuff. Want to meet all of them virtually for now. And then once we have the pre-approval, we can start looking at homes with Ashley, for example, as she mentioned, with masks and gloves and sanitizer. We're going to make sure we keep safe here. And we're opening up the floor. We have this room until 6 p.m. I know you guys, if you want to, feel free to drop off, but we're open to answering any questions from the audience at this time. So Neerath asks, can we access this recording later for our own reviewing? We definitely will. I do know that Zoom, with everyone on Zoom nowadays, it is taking a little time for them to process the recordings. So it might take a few days before we can get it to you. But if you signed up on Eventbrite, then put your email in. So anyone who does want a recording of this, just type your email in right here, and then we'll make sure we get it to you. Awesome. Thanks, Jade. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Neerath. Are you a moving company, Neerath?
No, I just have many emails depending on what my things are.
Okay, awesome. And Jay has a question on VA loans. So Assad, do you do VA loans?
We do offer it. So that is an option that I could discuss with you. for your specific scenario, you could reach out to me directly and we could have a more in-depth conversation on.
So keep putting your emails in, and if you guys have any other questions, you guys can unmute and ask. And JQ asks, are lenders open to matching interest rates from other lenders at this time? So Assad, that would be your question.
I might be happy to try and go to bat for you. What my management would ask is a copy of like a loan estimate from the other lenders so we can actually see what they're offering you in terms of the rate and the fees, and we could try. But generally our rates are very competitive. So like I said, it's definitely something I can go to bat for you and try.
So Nero had a question regarding, do you guys have experience handling foreclosures? So Wilson, I know you've worked with a few sellers regarding foreclosures, so if you can dive into that. He might have hopped off. But yes, so we have helped some people in foreclosure situations. If you do look on Zillow, you might see pre-foreclosure, auction, and those don't necessarily mean that they are for sale quite yet. Pre-foreclosure just means that they are defaulted on their loan. So they might have missed a few payments. So they're working with the banks right now to negotiate some strategies for them to stay, making some partial payments. We've worked with a lot of sellers going through foreclosure and auction as well. So these are a little more difficult to purchase. Auction homes, you would have to go to your county steps. So in Redwood City, for example, is the San Mateo County steps, and in San Francisco, and look at the auction date to see and you would have to be able to purchase with all cashier's checks. So a lot of investors are purchasing this. Typical banks, Assad, for example, Bank of America, all these banks, even hard money lenders would not be able to help you purchase auctions, but foreclosed homes, we can have them, but they are very rare at this moment. There is some potential inventory, but they usually are able to work with the banks to negotiate something to stay longer, or they would just list it on the open market. Okay. You're welcome. Thanks, Linos. So if we don't have any other questions, we'll just stay on for just 2 more minutes here, and then we'll end the call from there.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. And you guys can always reach out to us, social, or send us a message or email us in case you guys have any specific questions. I think people might be waiting for a happy hour, guys. You guys have your White Claws and your wine and your hard liquor? Let me go grab it real quick. I'm just kidding.
Jenny, you want to talk about the other events we have coming up?
Yeah, we also have 2 more webinars on the schedule right now. On Friday, we're at noontime PST, Pacific Standard Time. We will be talking about refinances. So Jay, I know you had some questions regarding refinances specifically, so we can dive into that a little longer. It will only be from 12 to 1 p.m. And then next week, from 2 to 3, we're going to talk about estate, trust, and succession planning. So even if you don't own a home, but if you do plan on owning a home, it is very important to get a estate and trust set up, because we know right now it's a time of uncertainty. So we want to make sure you are very well protected. God forbid anything happens to you, that you know, where you don't have to go through probate, which probate is where it'll take sometimes 6 months, 9 months, or even a year or longer for people to handle and establish the estates of your properties and your assets. So even if you like have a job and have a 401k or any money in the bank, it's important to still start looking at these options on estate and trust and succession planning. So Anya's gonna give some vodka.
Assad, did you cover investment properties and like how that would be different for people's rates?
No, touch on that real quick. So investment properties are looked at different than primary residence. There's 3 ways you can take occupancy on a home. So primary residence, and then you have a second home / vacation home. Those 2 guidelines are pretty similar. So if you're doing a primary or a second home, they'll have very similar rates and similar guidelines in terms of down payment requirements. The one that's a little bit on the other side is the investment property. That's going to require a little bit higher down payment for loan amounts that are up to $765,000. Minimum down payment is 20%. So it's not too bad. It's, you can still get away with 20% down on an investment if you're going $765,000 loan amount. If your loan amount is over that, our portfolio products aren't designed to be too competitive with investment. So I would say the 20% is the minimum down payment and max loan is $765,000. In terms of the rates, it's pretty good right now for purchases. They're probably looking at a 30-year fixed, maybe around 4%, or maybe in the low 4s. The sweet spot on loans right now for agency loan sizes is $510,000 to $765,000. So if you're between that loan amount, those products right now are pricing out the best. So $510,000 to $765,000. That's called a super jumbo loan, or super conforming loan, or a jumbo conforming loan. So those are loans that are sold in the secondary market. They're agency loans, and yeah, that's the down payment requirement and the current rates on them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wilson, I think you're muted, Wilson.
I was just saying thank you to everyone. Thanks, Assad, Jeff, Jay, team members. I think I've done that a couple times.
Thanks everyone for joining. Ryan.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good day.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Jamie Lynn. Thanks, JQ.
Happy hour time.
Thanks, Assad. Appreciate you.
Thank you.